question about, so what do we do today? Like how about, if the way I understood it, can we do it ourselves? And I said I wasn't equipped to answer that question. So I did my homework, did a preparation, and this brings me back to a totally different type of study that I used to do quite often. In my early career in Israel, I had been at university doing Bible studies, and I was in the seminary, and we did more Talmud and Halakha, Jewish law. And when I came out, I didn't expect to be a synagogue rabbi, a congregational rabbi. I thought I would be an educator. And the best job that I got though was to be a synagogue rabbi, and that's what I ended up doing. But I landed in a synagogue of people which had a really high level of knowledge, who had a very high level of knowledge in Jewish studies. It was in Ramot, the northern suburb of Jerusalem, and so I did. And so then people started to ask me what to do about things, and I didn't want to be a halachic authority. I knew this stuff, right? This is what I'd studied in yeshiva years beforehand as well, and so I knew my material, and I was on the law committee of the Masorti, the conservative rabbinate in Israel. And conservative, for those that don't know, doesn't mean conservative as in right-wing traditional. It's the conservative movement in Judaism, which is actually liberal and progressive. And I remember one woman, Chaya, she says it was about to be a sabbatical year. And she said, what does Masorti Judaism, what does conservative Judaism hold about gardening in the sabbatical year? We're supposed to leave your land fallow. And I said, well, why don't you and your husband come in one night and we'll look at the sources, and I'll share them with you, and you'll make up your own mind, your own decision. That was in my mind, that's how you did halakha. You learned the sources, you looked at it, and then you decided for yourself. Not that a rabbi would tell you, me or anybody else would tell you how to act. And she said in Hebrew, Azov shtuyot, which in Yiddish would be, Nu shoin, narishkeit. Just let me know what I need to do. Don't bother me with the details. Just tell me what I need to do. That was a rude awakening for me about what people are not where I am in the headspace, but still many were. And whenever there was an issue that came up in the news or a need in our community, one of the early issues was bone marrow donation, bone marrow recruiting, and there was movement in the ultra-Orthodox world against anything having to do with sharing of body parts after death, while living, and now it's different in Israel. But the time in the early 90s, it was different. Other issues were visiting HIV, people that had HIV/AIDS, whatever it was. I approached the topic with going back to, if there are biblical sources, then what are the sources in rabbinic literature, medieval halachic literature, and then today, what are the options, either Orthodox or Reform or conservative rabbis that have written on the topic? Because I really believe that that's what halakha is. Halakha is the process, being committed to halakha, which I am as a conservative rabbi, as a member of the Rabbinical Assembly. Being committed to halakha means going through a process of sorts and deciding how I do it. I don't think it's about whether something is permissible or something is forbidden. The best example that I can give you is a responsa that I wrote together with Rabbi David Galinkin, Professor David Galinkin, who is if I'm to the left, he's to the right in the movement. Very, very little C conservative. And it was about body piercing. And the kids from the youth movement had asked us, what is the Masorti halacha on body piercing? And there was quite a colorful discussion, because apparently I knew a lot more places in the body that were pierced than my colleagues, who were a little bit more, we'll call them less out there in the world. And in the end, we wrote the paper together, and it wasn't about yes or no. I remember Galinkin saying, unfortunately, I could find no way to forbid this, because he was uncomfortable with body piercings of any kind. Maybe a female with 2 earrings was all right, but the whole thing that was, about multiple piercings, noses, lips, other parts of the body. And he couldn't find a way to forbid it. He had wanted to forbid it. And instead, he brought the different sources, and then somebody said, yes, but this is very gray. You're not giving us a clear yes or no. And I said, that's exactly the point. The point is, when you come to do a body piercing or whatever it might be, these are the things we think you should think about. One was hygiene. And so there was information brought about tongue piercing and how that is detrimental to dental health or whatever. That was part of the thinking. One was a modesty. Are you piercing your body to be immodest in any way? And what if a couple, one of them pierces their body in a very, very private part to be more erotic in their relationship? That there's no reason to forbid that, right? It depends what your motivation is. Do your parents say, no, we don't want you to do it? So honoring your parents came into it. And I'm very proud. And actually, I've heard that he talks about that tshuva often as well, that responsa, because people do not think of me and him in the same. He's gone on to do great things. He's a very important thing. He was a dean of a major institution, and he writes, a very prolific writer, but we're totally on the opposite sides. Why am I telling you all this? Malka asked, could I just say this myself? Could one say this themselves and then change the destiny of the dream or the feeling about a dream? Now, I hope I didn't misunderstand that was your question, Malka.
No, that was exactly.
Okay. So I went back to, I didn't do the whole thing I would do. I went back to a number of different, mostly medieval and pre-modern sources, and I brought them today. And this is how I used to do a lot of studies about a lot of different things that we do. This kind of showing this almost linear, but not always linear, development of a particular law with the intention of learning from the conversation and not necessarily deciding what to do from the bottom line. That's going to be evident, at least from one of our sources, which is a little bit complicated. Okay. So then, Malka, why don't you do the honors and reread the paragraph that we ended. It's not the last paragraph we did last week were the three paragraphs of the three different things with verses. So I'm going back to the original paragraph that sparked this conversation, and then we'll do this, and then we'll go on with one more paragraph going forward in the Talmud. So go ahead, Malka, with number one.
Which number is it?
Number one.
Number one. Oh, Baruch 55b?
Yeah.
Okay. Rav Huna Bar Ami said that Rabbi Padat said that Rabbi Yochanan said, one who sees a dream from which his soul is distraught should go and have it interpreted before three. Interpreted? Didn't Rav Hasidah say a dream not interpreted is like a letter not read? Rather say as follows, he should better it be before three. He should bring three people and say to them, I saw a good dream, and they should say to him, it is good, and let it be good. May God make it good. May they decree upon you from heaven 7 times that it will be good, and it will be good. Afterwards, they recite 3 verses of transformation, 3 of redemption, and 3 about peace.
Okay. So the last part, the 3 about redemption, 3 about peace, etc., that was what we ended with. We're not dealing with that now. Now we're dealing with, there's this typological number of 3 here, going before 3. I think I had said last week it's 3 as a beit din. I mean, the idea is the same, but there's nobody, I looked into nobody says it's 3 sages. It's 3 anybody's. And that's going to become a conversation. In other words, share it with other people. That's what that means. Share it with other people. And making a dream better becomes a verb here, to better a dream, right? We might say improve, but they purposely use that in the translation because it's strange also in Aramaic to say better in that way. But it's the same word as good, to make it gooder, Okay. Now, there was this issue about saying something 7 times. That's not the translation here, because that's probably the simple meaning of the Talmudic text is, may heaven decree 7 times that it's good. But there is confusion. And the way that I presented it last time, we did talk about saying something 7 times. And there's basis for that we're going to see today. But what we don't know here exactly is, there's nothing about who the 3 are. And I'm already telling you, I didn't find anything about the 3. And how is it done exactly? And can it be done on your own? Which was Malka's original question, which I'm already going to warn you, Malka, we don't really have an answer for. Not in the sources, but hopefully this will enable you to give yourself your own answer. So Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, is the main commentary on most parts of the Talmud, as he is for the Chumash, for the 5 books of Moses, and many other books of the Hebrew Bible. Not everything that is Rashi in print is what Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki Rashi wrote. And a number of studies have been done about how his commentary was added on to by those we call, later were called the Balei HaTosafot. They are the masters, or the owners, or the writers of the additions. The Tosafot literally means the additions. And Sid might remember when he was younger that on both pages of the Talmud, others who have studied Talmud, in a classical Vilna edition of the Talmud, the text is in the middle. Rashi is on the inner column, which is smaller, and the outer column is Tosafot. Yeah, is Tosafot. And when you relate to Tosfot, Tosfos, very often Tosfos is related to as if it's a person. One person wrote it, but Tosfot are a series of the students, or the Talmud students who were in the school, the overall school of Rashi, over a 200-year period, more 200, maybe more, of the 12th, 13th century in France, Provence, and Germany. Okay, so there's nothing in Rashi about it, but we hear about Rashi's opinion in the comment in the Tosafot that's on this page. So why don't you read this one as well, Malka, number 2.
7 times that it will be good. This is the formula that is used 7 times. Quote, from heaven may it be good for you. Though some interpret that he shall be the one to recite 7 times. I have seen a good dream, and they, the 3, repeat it after him. However, Rashi would only say it 3 times.
Okay, after I wrote this translation, because there is no translation of Tosafot that I know of, I revised it. This morning I revised the translation. I got it wrong, because Tosafot, like the Talmud itself in a classical edition, doesn't have any punctuation. There's no commas, there's no periods, there's no vowels. So, and that's not, I'm not in that world. I used to be in that world a little bit more. Those in that world, they intuitively know the right reading. The right reading should be, I believe, this is the formula, colon, what are 2 dots? Colon or semicolon? This is the formula as follows: 7 times from heaven, may it be good for you. And that's reflected in the translation that's based on Steinsaltz as well above. May they decree upon you from heaven 7 times that it will be good. Now, so that's the formula. 7 times, or from heaven 7 times, may they decree in heaven 7 times that it may be good for you. That's the formula according to Tosafot. But then very often in Tosafot, there's the wonderful words, v'yesh mifarshim, or yesh lomar, that yesh lomar, as some people would say, is an answer. Yesh mifarshim, there are those that interpret, meaning there's a different view of how to interpret it here, of how to do it. And that is, he shall be the one to recite it 7 times. What does he recite 7 times? I have seen a good dream. And they, the 3 who he's doing it in front of, they repeat it after him. So very murky, so it's even worse than, you're getting further and further away from your answer, Malka, right? As the tradition gets a little bit cloudier. And then this is great. And then it says, Aval Reish Yud is Rabbi Yitzchak. That's Rashi in this case. But Rashi would only have said it 3 times. Okay. So just a little bit, a snapshot of what was happening in the 12th, 13th century. we jump now to the 16th century. In between, there's an important work called the Tur Shulchan Aruch, which is the archetype or the first document or composition upon which what we call the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo's Shulchan Aruch of the 16th century, was based upon. It has 4 sections. One of the sections has to do with day-to-day life. One of the sections has to do with how men deal with women. One of the sections has to do with civil law, civic law, torts. And one section is kind of a potpourri, and that section has the laws of kashrut and visiting the sick and giving charity and those kinds of things. Okay, so this is in the day-to-day section, and it comes at a time around different things that are done on special occasions on a day-to-day basis, depending on what's happening in somebody's life. And here we get Rabbi Yosef Karo living in the 16th century. He publishes this book, and somebody else was working on a similar kind of book or the same kind of book. Rabbi Moshe Isserlich, the Ramah, he was living in Krakow a little bit late. They overlapped, and when Karo's edition of Shulchan Aruch came out, he realized, or people said, there's no reason for you to write your book, it's already been done. So they published his glosses to the Shulchan Aruch, and that's the Shulchan Aruch that we have today. Shulchan Aruch means the ordered table, and that is the quintessential book of Jewish law, from which most conversations and discussions, at least in the Orthodox world, stem from that book, and then it's all commentary after that. So it's rare that nobody goes to the Torah to find out how to live as a Jew. That's just not done. That's not what Judaism is. It used to be people would go to the Talmud, but the truth is today, in observant lifestyles, people don't go to the Talmud. I mean, I do, we do, because we have a different approach, but in the more traditional Jewish world, you don't go to the Talmud to find out what to do, because who are you? You have all these people have interpreted it since then. So you start with the Shulchan Aruch, and even then, you usually go according to certain rabbis, and we're going to see one of them, who became more authoritative in your area of the Jewish world than others. Okay, so with that long introduction, let's take a look at Shulchan Aruch or Chaim. Why don't you read for us, Richard?
When one has a dream and is anxious about it, one can rectify the dream. Literally, they should make it good in front of 3 people who care about him. He can say to them, I had a good dream, and they could say to him, it is a good dream and it will be good. It is good to fast to nullify a bad dream, like fire on wood chips. Gloss, specifically, this applies to Yom Tov and even Shabbat.
Okay, so these are Rabbi Yosef Karo's words that he's distilled from his commentary, very, very long commentary called Beit Yosef, which is on the Tur Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yaakov Balaturim. And so this is a process going on for 100-something years. And he finally writes the words that are in regular print. And then Rabbi Moshe Isserlich agrees with this. He doesn't add anything or subtract anything, but he adds, that's what it means, gloss. Gloss is Rabbi Moshe Isserlich. He says, but this only applies to Yom Tov and even on Shabbat. That, or it especially applies. So what is that? That applies to the thing, when you have a bad dream, you should fast. So you should know that private fast days are still in practice in many communities. And they're not so much about, I did something wrong, so I have to fast to atone, the way we think of Yom Kippur. They're not a fast like, something really bad happened, like Tisha B'Av, the destruction of the temple, therefore we will continue to fast every year afterwards. It's a private fast, and most private fasts, I think, in practice, have to do with disturbing dreams that people have. And that's the way to, the English translation here, whoever translated said rectify, which is really what he wants to say, but literally gooding it, bettering it, making it good, or as was said before, quoting the Talmud. Okay, and here it's said once, and the 3. What I like what Rabbi Yosef Karo does is 3 people who care about him. I like that, right? This concern. Dreams are real, according to this, in that they cause anxiety, right? So nobody is really saying here anything about whether the dream is prophetic or if it means that somebody has to do something. What's really being said here, I understand, is we see dreams, they're real for the person who had them because they cause that person anxiety. I was asked, somebody who was becoming more orthodox with the time, it was in the 80s, and very intellectual dentist in Beverly Hills, very successful. He cornered me for a conversation. He says, listen, I was running on the track at UCLA, and I bent down to catch my breath. You know how you put your hands on your knees? I remember doing that when I was a kid, right? Put your hands on your knees to catch your breath. And something said to me that I felt I have to look up. And I looked up into the sky, and I saw in the clouds were written Yud, He, Vav, He, God's name. This is kind of similar to, and I don't mean to make light of this, you'll see in a second, to that scene in Serious Man where God's name was written, or something was written on the inside of the teeth, for those that saw the Coen Brothers movie. And he says, it really bothered me. I don't know, what does it mean? What do I do with it? And I remember saying to myself, this is not my world. I don't live in a world where I see, in my experience, Yud He Vav He, God's name, Yahweh, right, written in the clouds. But it was certainly real for him. And sort of just, instead of saying, well, I don't take that seriously, God forbid, I wouldn't say that. Or instead of saying, I don't, I said, oh, I know, you know so-and-so? You know him? Ask him. He knows about these things, Hasidic literature and Kabbalah. Whether he did or not, I'm happy to help people to bridge the gap. And often people will ask me questions that I say, that's a question for a Chabad rabbi, for instance, in our area. It's not a good question for me. Yeah, okay, so it's that person's reality. And I think if somebody cares about someone, they would go along with this, even if, this is my reading into it, even if they thought dreams were silly. If you care about somebody and they have anxiety, you know, favos nicht, right? Why would you not help? Unless it gets dangerous, right? Unless you're humoring somebody whose reality is distorted and is doing strange things or detrimental things to themselves or to others. Okay? Any questions about the Tosafot of Shulchan Aruch before we go on to a little bit more complicated stuff? Okay, so now everybody, everybody sees why we don't do this so often. This is a little bit too complicated, perhaps, for our context. Steve, did you want to say something, Stephen?
Yeah, just not to get us completely off track, but one of the other things I read said something that the dreams are caused by like indigestion. So this fasting, it kind of supports that.
Right. Right. That there is something when you overeat and overdrink, sometimes your dreams are a little bit strange. Yeah, that's your mind telling yourself to get, take it easy. Get back.
Hello.
Yes. No. Okay. So
okay. Do you want me to leave and join when you're ready?
Okay. That happens too. Now, the Shulchan Aruch, as I said, we don't look at the Torah, and then we don't look at the Talmud. At some point, people really stop looking at the Shulchan Aruch. They'd read the Shulchan Aruch, but they wouldn't make a decision. In the Ashkenazic world, the Sephardic and Mizrahi world are a little bit different. They have their own authorities they went to. And this has to do with zeitgeist, what's happening in the world. In the late 19th, early 20th century, modernity is overwhelming the traditional Jewish community. For hundreds of years, simple Jews went about their Jewish practice more or less in the same way. From time to time, there would be difficult questions which were asked great rabbis, and there would be extensive literature. We call that responsa literature. But the simple people really just kind of did what they knew to do. And in the 19th century, you start to get these handbooks of distilled law. One is called the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which some people grew up with. It's called in English, I think it was just called the Shulchan Aruch, and that was a book which was prevalent when I was a kid. Orthodox families had it, but really it's a translation. It was an English translation of Rabbi Shlomo Gansfried's Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the shortened Shulchan Aruch. Another one was the Chaye Adam, life of a person, life of a man, or life of a person, really life of a Jew. And it is what you do in your life from a Jewish point of view. This is rabbis who said, most people can't study the way we're doing it right now, the Shulchan Aruch. It's too complicated. And then there was an in-between world, and this became the dominant voice in the yeshiva world, the Ashkenazic yeshiva world, when I was young, when I was a teenager and a young man. And still today, I use this commentary to because it just happened to be an excellent commentary of the man who we came to know as the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim is mostly known because of his books. The main book about gossiping and bad-mouthing and all the laws of proper language. Chafetz Chaim. There was never a book until he wrote it at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. Lived in Poland. A little man, huge authority who I think did not even have rabbinical ordination. I'd read that at some point. I remember that from the history, but a huge influence. And today, when somebody buys, it's not in the large edition of the Shulchan Aruch. We're going to see something from that afterwards. But there's special books, 6-volume sets that every yeshiva bocher has, and even the women that study in seminaries, they all use this today. The Mishnah Berurah. So I'm going to read this because it's a little complicated how to read it. These are his comments on that one paragraph above from the Shulchan Aruch. And when his soul is distressed about, remember there's different translations at work here. I'm using others' translations. So when it said above, when one has a dream and is anxious about it, here's his soul is distressed about it, which is a literal translation of what's in the Hebrew there. That is, even if it has no bad substance. Someone is anxious about a dream, even though it doesn't say like, he dreamt that his arm's going to get cut off, God forbid, whatever it is. Even when it's a dream that's just so, as an example later on is like an elephant standing on a palm tree, something like that. Like what that the person can't think straight because of this dream. I had the strangest dream, but not because there's something bad about it. Okay. So they should make it good. That word, those words that keep coming up, they should rectify it, make it good. Even when the dreamer fasts, they should do this, right? So fasting is a given, but you should have people. So the idea is you deal with it yourself in many, many ways if you're anxious about it. And it's good to make it good in Shacharit. And the best time to do it is during the morning service. Shacharit is the morning daily service. Because eager ones put a mitzvah first. That's a common phrase already in the Talmud. Zrizim makdimim lemitzvot. The early bird gets the worm is kind of like what it is in English. If you have a mitzvah, go out and do it right away. Even so, they shouldn't say to the dreamer, go eat and enjoy, right? If the person is fasting and he's doing this, they shouldn't say, okay, now you've checked the box, now just go eat and enjoy, which is a quote from Proverbs. If not, when the dreamer isn't fasting, okay. And when they recall the dream in their thoughts, when it's being made good. Yes, and I'm sorry, this is not a good translation. It's, and then they recall the dream when it's being made good. They have to be thinking about the dream, right, in mind. So there's something about this kind of treatment. It's as if when you have electrodes attached to your brain today, when you think about certain things, they can measure certain things. You've got to be thinking about it. You can't just go, I had a dream, I'm upset about it, and then you could be fantasizing about something else while they do this. It only works, he says, if you're thinking about it. In the presence of three, right, we talked to who are those three. It's a mitzvah to be one of the three to make the dream good, since it restores the dreamer's soul with this. And even on Shabbat, it's possible to make a dream good. And the reason he says that is because treatment of most kinds, medical treatment, is usually not allowed on Shabbat unless it's life-saving. But you're not supposed to do treatment things, healing things. For those of you that grew up with the Gospels, the Pharisees who were upset with Jesus for healing for healing the man after the scene with the eating of the grain in the field. The man is healed. It was on Shabbat. They said, on Shabbat, you healed him on Shabbat. We might think, what a wonderful time to do that. But according to rabbinic law, you don't do healing on Shabbat. And then they say it will be good. And here it says 7 times to make it a decree. So according to the Chafetz Chaim, to Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, you actually do say it 7 times. This language needs to be said by the answerers 3 times, and some say it's 7 times. So even there's a, and you think to yourself, like, what difference does it make? But people took these things really seriously. And at the end of the good making, that was kind of my translation there, they should say to the dreamer, now go and eat bread and joy and drink with a glad heart, as long as he's not fasting. One who dreams a dream which is harsh on their fellow should fast. Here's something else that he's adding, right? It's not all about you. You dreamt something else, you should fast. If that's causing you anxiety. And it sounds like here he's saying, no, there's a reason. Maybe something's going on up there in the upper world that you can affect by fasting. The word good, he takes this opportunity to quote Pri Megadim, is another commentator before him. Pregnant and nursing people, one shouldn't teach them to fast. Rather, they should only redeem with money. It's interesting that somebody, this must be a recent translation where people talk about pregnant people as opposed to pregnant women. Of course, in his world, it would have only been women. You're not allowed to fast for medical reasons. Then do something instead of that, like giving charity. A fast, but specifically when one repents with it, since the fast works like a sacrifice to exonerate. It's not just not eating. You've got to fast in order to repent. Unlike what I think the previous sources wanted to say, that you fast because you're anxious and it gives you an awareness. It's something to do with your own psychological self-care. And just as a sacrifice is ineffective without repentance, as it says, we'll go on, so too is a fast of a dream. And then finally on the words, like a flame to chaff to wood chips, and in any case, it's not obligatory to fast, and rather it's optional. Although the Shulchan Aruch says, and this is like the best way to do it, it'll burn it right out, right? That's kind of what he's saying. Chofetz says you should know you don't have to fast. All right. So Malka, we got one thing straight. You don't have to fast. But interesting, until now, there's nothing other than just understanding those 3 people are people that care about you. Okay. I feel
it sounds like you can't do it yourself. I mean, it seems like every source is saying you really can't do it by yourself. Correct.
Megan, do you want to read number 5 for us? We're going back in time to one of the major commentators on the Shulchan Aruch, Magen Avram, Avram Gumbiner, often written with a U, but Gumbiner. There's this. There was a lot of Chofetz Chaim is later, but after Moshe Isserlich in Krakow, Poland was this hotbed of halachic literature. So a lot of the commentators on the Shulchan Aruch itself, which is when he lived in Tzfat, in the land of Israel in the 16th century, in 17th century, there are 17th and 18th century, there are lots and lots of rabbis living in Krakow who are doing this kind of work. And this one is one of the famous ones. What does he say on making it good?
Make it good. He must remember the dream when this is being done. And if there are only 2 at some point, a third must do so as well.
Okay, Rita Claire, we'll get to questions just when we finish this section, okay? So save the comment, write it down. So this is what the Chofetz Chaim bases his comment on what the Magen Avram says. You have to have intentionality. You've got to think about the dream as well. But he adds another thing. You can do it in two. They don't all 3 have to be together. So this is something we hadn't considered, right? The idea here is less of a Beit Din, the way that I presented it. I think I presented it wrong last week. And it's more of sharing. And 2 is all right, but 3 is a crowd, right? It's a few. And so the more you share it, it seems, the better off you'll be, because I think that's the deep psychology here in people speaking, telling their story and sharing it, which went on to be major treatment, right? I'm not saying that Freud read the Shulchan Aruch with the commentaries. I'm saying pretty much that he didn't have that background. And so why don't you read another one? And this is another commentary on the Shulchan Aruch.
And if there are only two, even thought, the Talmud says in front of three, they need not do so all at the same time.
Right. So it should be even though. Right. So this becomes, this is him quote. He's not quoting. He gets to this conclusion himself. But this becomes a thing. In other words, it's not a Beit Din. Okay. For those that want to look and see what a modern liberal Orthodox who became more or less not the official, but the unofficial founder of the Masorti movement in England, Louis Jacobs, it's what I would call classical conservative Judaism from the early part of the 20th century. Louis Jacobs wrote quite a bit, and there is an excerpt from one of his books that's on the internet at this particular, on My Jewish Learning, on this link. If you want to see, I didn't see anything there that really brings us, in fact, I was a little disappointed. I had expected somebody like Louis Jacobs to say, something like we're going to hear from the Lubavitcher Rebbe in just a second, that, you know what, people, don't take this stuff too seriously. Now, on one hand, I presented, if it causes somebody anxiety, that's their reality. And I am not a rabbi, the kind of a rabbi or educator that tries to tell people, this is how you shall think. My self-image is that I want to share tools with people and how they may improve their lives, improve their brains, and come closer to Judaism, closer to God, close to the Jewish people by being part of this conversation. And so you could take a look at what he says there, but I didn't find any liberal rabbis that spoke about this. So this is the best I could do. But on the Chabad site, as you probably know, that Chabad has done an amazing job in seeding the internet with their stuff. It's not just putting the material out there, it's knowing how to put the right words and the links and all that kind of stuff. They have people working on it. So when you look up something, as you may know, Jewish-wise, very often the first things that come up are Chabad and Esha Torah, and also My Jewish Learning. But so Megan, if you could read this, this is a combination of, the first paragraph is Chabad literature, starting from the Baal HaTanya, who was the first rabbi of Chabad, Shner Zalman of Liadeh. And it's in, and he has his own Shulchan Aruch, by the way. I have a copy upstairs. It's just really small print, so it's hard to use. But this, I chose this instead. This is distilled from his and another Lubavitcher Rebbe's writings over the 20th century. And then the second paragraph is quoted in the name of the Rebbe, of Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Go ahead.
For the most part, dreams are meaningless. They are either the result of our thoughts during the day, some stressful situation we have been in, or overeating. Only those who are extremely pious, with every moment of the day spent in divine service, can be sure that even in dreams, when one does not have full control over one's faculties, there is significance and meaning. It is for this reason that the best remedy for a bad dream is to totally ignore it. In fact, getting all riled up about a bad dream is sometimes exactly what our evil inclination wants, to make us depressed so that we'll find it difficult to continue on with our daily routine and the good we do.
So let it be known publicly that Lazar totally embraces the Rebbe's words here from a halachic point of view, from a thinking point of view. How wonderful. Now, of course, it was worded in a way by somebody who knows English and that writes in a way that's going to be attractive, and there's nothing wrong with that. It would be interesting to see the transcripts of the Rebbe's. The Rebbe did not write much, but his like most Hasidic Rebbes, when he spoke in public in Yiddish, it was transcribed, and then those the transcriptions you get of those conversations are sometimes in the things that Rabbi Kreiman brings you if you're sick. You know, those pieces of paper for those that live in this neighborhood, those little pamphlets. And there's recordings of some of it. So for those that study Chabad, Lubavitch, it would be interesting to know, what the words were, if this translation is true. But let's take it at face value right now. And going back to Malka's question of halacha, the reason that I went for this, that I answered Malka in this way is part of our class, is because something I brought up in the very first class that we had, or certainly when we began the dream stuff, was this is a nexus of halacha and agadah. On one hand, dreams are the stuff of legends and thoughts and feelings. That's agadah. And it's nothing to do about it. But here, there's something to do about it, right? If you choose, right? If it's bothering, there's some. So it's this is how all of these rabbis would say, you want to live a good Jewish life, you want to live a committed, a deep Jewish life, a qualitative Jewish life, whatever word modifier for Jewish we'd use there. Then when you're upset by a dream, these are the things you might do. And then comes the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory and says, well, maybe not. Who of you really are that pious that you can take your dreams seriously? It's what modern psychology says about dreams, that it's a garbage heap, right? It's a dump, or at least partially a dump, a garbage heap. Okay, Rita Claire, you've got a dream that you want to share with us. You've got something on your mind.
No, it's just that all this time that I'm listening to this, I'm just thinking that I don't think dreams make us anxious. I think it's our anxiety that causes us to have certain dreams, good or bad. I know myself when just the other day I dreamt about one of my granddaughters, and I was talking about it to my daughter. This is what we do. We have the need to discuss it or share it with somebody. How often have we all done that? Oh, I had this dream, and you talk about it with somebody.
So I'm going to argue with you a little bit, and I'm going to say, okay, that is what you do, and that's healthy. But many people, I think, don't. I think a lot of people are scared to share their dreams, certain dreams, with other people. There's probably everybody here has had at least one dream that they're not comfortable sharing with somebody else. That would be my guess. And some people, again, and I hear what you're saying about anxiety, chicken or egg kind of a thing. Yes, anxious people may dream more, but certainly people who are already anxious for other reasons, they get anxious about dreams. Whereas I don't terribly get anxious about dreams. I'm amused by my dreams. I remember a lot of my dreams while I'm in the shower in the morning, and by the time I'm putting on my clothes, I've forgotten them. So if I want to share it with somebody, with Sasha or with somebody else, very often, even before I get in the shower, I'll write them a message. I say, you're not going to believe what I just dreamt. And I've had amazing, but they never cause me anxiety. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. I mean, if you really get to think about it, it shouldn't cause you anxiety. You should have some kind of understanding of the reason that you had these particular thoughts. I just think I just share a lot. So
right. So and that's you, but others don't, right? So again, so how might Jewish law, halacha, be it come to the aid of the contemporary person, contemporary Jew, or somebody who's in Jewish circles, is taking a look at this, say, okay, so what do I do when I have a dream, and how does it affect me? And am I going to share with 3 people or 2 people or 1 person, or am I going to say this is Narishkeit, as the Lubavitcher Rebbe says? So all these are possibilities, and they stem from one passage in the Talmud. Mm-hmm. And the more we read in this dream section of the Talmud, the more we're going to be, on one hand, confused about, so what does Judaism say? What do the sages of the Talmud say about dreams? It's going to be more and more confusing because it's this, that, and the other thing too. And either we will leave this study far more frustrated than we were, than we started, or we will take a step back and say, sages, Talmud, but in the end, it depends upon us and what we're going to do. And that, of course, are my own conclusions. So let's read one more section from the Talmud, so at least we feel we've gone ahead. So just to end this part, Malka, as I already hinted at before, said explicitly, you're not going to get the answer that you asked.
See.
But so in the end, you got to make up your own mind, dear. That's
right. I thought what the Lubavitcher Rebbe did seems to me strange, because he didn't even bother. Everyone else, like the Torah, gave credence to what was said before. He didn't even mention them, say anything about what they said, oh, it's foolishness, just forget it.
Yeah, but he's in the tradition of Chabad, though. The first paragraph, the footnote that's there, references the Shulchan Aruch Harav. So that means that the Baal Tanya already did that, 150 years ago, or I don't remember exactly, but in the 19th century. So he already, and many Hasidim in their literature, Hasidic broke away from the world. The world beforehand that we were documenting was very much became the reshut, not the property, but the domain of misnagdim. For those that know a little bit about Eastern Central or Eastern European history, that there were people that studied Talmud, and the elites rose to the top, very few, and the people in the ground were suffering, and nobody was really addressing the little people, so to speak, were not being addressed by, and that left a vacuum for different movements of some false messiahs, Frank or Shabtai Tzvi, and then the Baal Shem Tov and the movement that followed was a way of doing Judaism that would relate to the simple people, not just those that could study Talmud, and to bring them a different kind of day-to-day worship. And some of that had to do with expressing things with dance and with joy and with song. Some of it had to do with changing some of the customs. A lot of it had to do with Kabbalah. It was a kind of Kabbalah that was, maybe it's not right to say watered down, but it was reinterpreted for the masses, as opposed for just those that were 40 years old and older who had a strong basis in Talmud study. So not entirely surprising, at least from my point of view. And then again, perhaps that's the way it's edited and written for a contemporary readership of the internet. That's what I mentioned about looking at the source. Okay, so let's start reading the next section. Stephen, you want to read the first few lines? I'll stop you at some point. We're continuing with this. We're continuing in a big way. We're continuing the issue of dreams, and this is the beginning of a longer conversation between three rabbis that were hanging out together. Go ahead.
Okay. Aminar and Mar Sutra and Rav Ashi were sitting together. They said, "Let each and every one of us say something that the other has not heard." One of them began.
By the way, good advice. Isn't this, think about your happy hour, everybody, right? You guys get together every week, or that's the Palm Springs thing, but wherever you are, how often do we find ourselves with our peers and we're just telling the same things over again? Not because we've forgotten necessarily, but because we're also repeating. How often do we sit down and people are just repeating what they saw on CNN or on Fox or whatever it is? They're repeating with everybody else. And sometimes I want to scream. I don't, because I'm trying to be polite. Hello, we're all reading the same thing. We're all listening to the same thing. Let's talk about your dreams, for instance. Let's talk about something different. That's me. Sorry for my hitpartzut here, for my outbreak, but sometimes a little, and so that's what I was preparing yesterday for this. That's the first thing that came to mind. Okay, Stephen,
I think, Rabbi,
tell us something.
We should write this sentence in very large print and put it in the table at happy hour every single week, because like yesterday, it was like I'm sitting on one side of the table. So Ella said something, and then Rita said the same thing, and then Jackie said the same thing, and then it was just weird.
Well, there's another aspect with our chevra, right? Half of them can't hear properly, so they're also
there's that too.
Yeah, there's age, there's memory, there's things, but now I'm being serious though. It's not about one particular happy hour See, all those that don't live in Palm Springs, see what you're missing. You could go to Wednesday afternoon happy hour with some of the folks here. But really, we find ourselves in family situations. Look at Rosh Hashanah is coming up. Families are going to get together. I have a very, very strong relationship with a friend of mine who's a rabbi who he often asked me to look through his sermons. Unlike me, who I don't really give proper traditional sermons. I teach a lot during the prayer in and out, and sometimes he's bringing it up, and even he's asking. He says, "Am I just saying what I said a million times before with different words?" It's hard to find something novel, something new. Anyway, these three guys got together in the 4th century in Babylonia, right? This is towards the end of the Talmudic period, and they get together and they say, "You know what? Let's say everybody brings something new to the conversation, refreshing." Stephen, bring us something new from. And it's interesting. It doesn't say in the rest of the narrative that we're going to begin today and finish next time. It doesn't say who says what, because it's less important. What the Talmud, as the Talmud wanted to do here, is wanted to say, here's 3 guys that said, let's bring something new. And it's not about who said it. Go ahead.
All right. One of them began and said, "One who saw a dream and does not know what he saw should stand before the priest, and when they lift their hands during the priestly blessing and say the following: Master of the universe, I am yours, and my dreams are yours. I dream a dream that I do not know what it is, whether I have dreamed of myself, or whether my friends have dreamed of me, or whether I have dreamed of others. If the dreams are good, strengthen them and reinforce them like the dreams of Joseph. And if the dreams require healing, heal them like the waters of Mara by Moses, our teacher, and like Miriam for her Chazat, and like, Ezekiel from his illness, and like the waters of Jericho by Elijah. Yeah. And just as you transform the curse of Balaam, the wicked, into a blessing, so transform all my dreams for me for the best."
Okay, so this is about the theme of transformation, of making one thing which is not so good to make it good. And the poet here, whoever said this here originally, or this formula, the creator of this formula, and we'll talk about the halachic side of this as well, kind of went on a not a rant. What do you call a rant? Is angry, right? What's like just kind of, I'm on a, help me out, folks. I'm on a roll. Kind of I'm on a roll, and that one in the Bible, and that one in the Bible. So all these things are things that some of you may remember, some of you don't. Balaam was the prophet who was hired to curse the people of Israel. Instead, God made his curse into a blessing. Elisha, who was Elijah's student, is a famous story similar to Moses' story, where there's bitter waters and he sweetens the waters, makes them drinkable. Miriam had the scaly skin, which we call tsarat, which often you see as leprosy. I translated the translation here from leprosy to tsarat because it's not. Hezekiah also had that. No, it's Uzziah who had tsarat. Hezekiah was sick in another way. In all these cases, there's a healing of sorts, a transformation from bad to good. Now, what is the situation that the Amorai, the sage is talking about? We don't do it in our prayer. Some of you that grew up in traditional prayers, on the Shalosh Regalim, the pilgrimage festivals, and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the priests, and in Israel, the land of Israel, it's every day. And in some of the congregations in Israel, just on Shabbat. The Kohanim, those that can trace their lineage back to the Kohanim, they're invited up to the bima for what's called the duchanim. Duchan means the bima. So they're bimaing, right? They're invited up. So Sid, you remember this, right? They'll go like this. We don't see this. They pull the Levites will go and wash their hands for them. This is done to this very day in Orthodox and even some conservative synagogues. And then they'll put their prayer shawls over their heads, and underneath they're doing this, right? Hence, this is the sign that you find on the gravestones of Kohanim. Even today, if you go to, especially to more traditional cemeteries, somebody who was a Kohen, he'll have this engraved above his name. And then they say that three-tiered blessing from the book of Numbers, Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, may the Lord's face shine upon you in countenance or with grace. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom, may God's presence be up close. This is my translation, but close, and embrace you and give you a sense of wholeness, of peace. All of you know it when I sing Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. I'm not going to do it. This is how we bless our children over the years at the Shabbat table, and I'd rather sing it. I'd rather us sing it together. But the priests do that. Now, that is considered to be a high point of any prayer when that's done. And so it's as if when the priests are up there, there's like this electricity in the air, and it is. If Sid, you may remember from your childhood when the Kohanim are duchening and you're not allowed to look. And sometimes you're hiding under your father's talus, if you remember that kind of thing. Some of you may have seen this in movies and TVs. There's a kind of electricity in the word. It's an impressive thing, even for me, and I'm against it from an ideological point of view, from an egalitarian point of view. So it's as if there's a little sliver of a door. Make this prayer quick, and it's in some prayer books. Some of the more in the Orthodox prayer books, maybe not the ones that are translated to English, although probably yes, but the older Orthodox prayer books have this prayer in it. Okay? This is one of the three said, and I'm giving you guys something new. This is the latest thing. It's as if back to the situation, the rabbi sitting around, I got one for you. There's a really new thing you can do for dreams. This is the latest trend in dream therapy. So go ahead and read the end of this.
Okay. Let's see. He should finish together with the priests, so the congregation responds, "Amen," to both. And if he is not,
he hold on. So he says something, and he kind of gets a free amen, because the people they're saying amen to the priestly blessing. So he's got to squeeze it in, so you can imagine he's got to get this in the amount of time. So he ends at the same time, so they can say amen. It's kind of like it's like hitching a ride. I'm going to hitch a ride on that amen. Okay, and go ahead.
And if he is not able to say so much, he should say, "Majestic one on high, who dwells in power, you are peace, and your name is peace. May it be your will that you bestow upon us peace."
And you want to say, why don't you just do that to begin with? Come on, the whole history lesson there, right? And so Malka, it turns out, not according to that part of the Talmud, but the next part, there is something you could do on your own, right? So in the end, you do get your answer if you want a traditional way. So I open it up for comments and questions just for a few minutes before I'll go home. Malka, parting words?
No, you gave me a lot to think about. I have to reread it and re-listen to parts again, because especially on the first part, kind of went over my head the first time through, but I have to go back and listen again.
Okay, so as I say, if people lost, they got bored today, don't blame me, blame Malka. It's her fault. I'm joking.
I wasn't bored at all.
No, Malka, I'm joking. It's my sense of humor. I'm just joking. No, I'm saying to the others, because Richard has a hard time with this stuff. So if he doesn't come next week, I'm going to know that I really do it. But
Malka could be our new piñata.
No, see that
we don't find out next week what the other two said that was novel.
Yes, we will. We'll get to that next week. Okay. I like the fact that we're ending with this short prayer, which is a wonderful generic prayer to say. And again, I wanted to share with you a little bit of my own experience over the years of study, how I used to do quite often. I don't do it much anymore. And even if it's for something that I'm not really I personally was not looking for a way to deal with my dreams. To me, I love doing this stuff, even if it has nothing to do with my own life. This is it's not fun. It's fun. It's enjoyable, but this is the meaning for me of being a Jew, is to be part of all these ongoing conversations. And if I'm bored with one or one's above my head, I go on to the next one. Okay. All right, everybody. Have a good Shabbat. Thank you for being here, and